We just had a little bit of a glitch. Sometimes in live broadcasts, things like this happen. This is Between the Lines Live here on Gazette.com. I'm Eric Singer along with Tom Roeder, senior military reporter, and we're talking about the biggest story of the week right now, a broken code, an Air Force Academy athletics investigation. Just to recap quickly, let's talk about the start of this investigation.
This investigation started in bits and pieces where, as a staff, we became aware of court-martials at the Academy, of misconduct at the Academy, and this is over the course of about 2 or 3 years. And we had pieces and parts floating around that were covered in news stories, but we had never put them together and looked at this. Is there a cultural problem within the athletic department at the Air Force Academy that allows this kind of misconduct to take place? The misconduct included drug use, sexual assault, violating orders. It ran the gamut up there. But no one had asked this question. What does this say about the climate? What does this say about the coach? What does this say about the athletic director? And should they have known that this group of players got put together who created an environment that was conducive to what went on?
Now, over the years, there have been similar sports investigations into the Air Force Academy, specifically with Fisher DeBerry and now with Coach Calhoun. What was your reaction when you saw, I mean, there were so many pieces of information in front of you, and you've covered the Academy and military installations as the senior military reporter for many years. What was your first reaction?
Oh no, this couldn't have happened. When you look at that and you've been covering it and as deeply involved as I am, it's like, wow, I can't be looking at what I'm looking at when it's in concert. You just feel that this is impossible at a place like the Academy, where the cadets live by this great code. They don't lie, they don't cheat, they don't steal, and they don't tolerate those who do. This is 95 to 98% of the cadets. Don't lose track of that. These are a lot of really good 18 to 22-year-olds up there. And when you see behavior like this, it is so outlandish that there's just a disconnect in your head where you see this couldn't be possible.
Obviously, covering this for many years, covering military installations and military news here at the Gazette, one question some may have, especially alumnus, you don't have an axe to grind. This is just information that was brought to your attention, and you investigated, and you care about the community, and you care about our military in Southern Colorado.
Yeah. In terms of having an axe to grind, I would say I do have an axe to grind. I've been to Iraq. I've been in combat. It serves my interest and the national interest to make sure that the officers we send overseas to fight our wars are people of good character, are people who got there honestly, are people who didn't behave the way these allegations show that these characters behaved, and that the Academy is doing everything it can to ensure that doesn't happen. So when we get to combat, we are not looking at a situation where we have somebody who committed acts of rape in college on the streets of Kabul, Afghanistan. So yeah, I have that axe to grind. In terms of the Academy, I've covered that place for more than a decade. I have covered it good, bad, and ugly, but mostly good. If you look at my stories over the years, I would say that there are few reporters, living or dead, who have written more good news stories about the Academy, and there's a lot of good news to tell. In terms of the football team, I don't cover football. That's not my job. I cover the military, and so I don't have an axe to grind on what their record might be, on how the players perform in the field. That's not my job to cover. So I'm not there. I'm not part of a crowd saying fire the coach. That's not my job. My job is to grab out allegations and take them where they lead me.
And speaking of which, right now the superintendent released a news release talking about the investigation. You followed up on that as well.
Absolutely, and we found out, our sports reporters found out today, that Johnson, Lieutenant General Michelle Johnson, the Academy superintendent, met with the football team on Sunday after this investigation came out, told me to read it, which is striking to me as a reporter, because I've run a lot of investigations over a 20-year career, and you don't see this kind of behavior on the part of people who've been investigated. The football players were also very forthcoming with sports reporter Brent Brigham and said, this isn't acceptable. We're not going to allow this to be part of our team, to be part of our academy. We want an environment that is respectful of women. We want an environment that lives up to our code and our values.
And the Center for Character, Leadership, and Development, which tries to instill these positive core values, I mean, this really reinforces their mantra of trying to instill those positives. But even what Lieutenant General Christopher Miller told me was something to the effect of, there are potentially people who will break the honor code, and we don't want those people in the Air Force.
And I really think that's where leadership does come from in all these cases. But what we need to see up there is what steps are taken to ensure this doesn't happen. In football, there are so many things influencing which cadets are wanted for these programs. Who's recruited? There is a drive to win on a football team. You cannot deny that. Is that drive to win in such a place that we would take risks on cadets who shouldn't otherwise be at the academy in order to win football games? What we found was, and you can judge for yourself whether or not you find this troubling, the academy would look at players who had a 50% chance of making it through 4 years at that school. Is that good enough? I don't know. But it's definitely something that they are asking themselves hard questions about. And I think the community and the Americans, public as a whole, needs to ask if that's what they expect out of their service academies.
Based on your experience over many years covering military news, do you foresee sweeping changes, or do you foresee incremental changes?
I think we've already seen incremental change at the academy. We've seen them take steps to change the recruiting process, to take harder looks at athletes. We have seen an investigation ordered as a result of questions that the Gazette was asking. I think those are good steps. I think if we see sweeping change, it will come out of this Inspector General review of the athletic department, because they want to know, General Johnson wants to know, does our athletic department meet the values of the academy? Are the goals of the athletic department compatible with the goals of the academy? If they're not, they have some sweeping change to make, and knowing the Air Force, I think we'll see those changes made.
Now, for some people who might be joining us, we are Between the Lines live with senior military reporter Tom Roeder of the Gazette, talking specifically about a broken code. The Air Force Academy Superintendent now calling for investigation of athletic transgressions that Tom wrote about. Just to put this in perspective, we're not talking about, are we talking about the current class of cadets, the class of, when are we talking about this time frame of these transgressions?
This occurred over a 3-year period, beginning in 2012 and running in, or beginning in 2010 and running into 2012. So most of the athletes on the team now had no connection to this. What we saw was beginning in 2010, a lot of drug use. They were using a synthetic marijuana variant called Spice, which was considered marginally legal at the time, although it broke Air Force rules to use this. It's you could buy it in head shops around town, something you smoked, and it mimicked the effects of pot. We had students using this from the academy at parties in 2010, including a lot of athletes. This caused an investigation where agents of the Office of Special Investigations in the Air Force were actually going into dorm rooms, doing their equivalent of a search warrant to find this substance, and they found it at the school. Wide investigation there. That sets up the table for 2011, where this kind of behavior didn't stop after this major push to eliminate it in 2010. In December 2nd, 2011, there was a huge blowout party in Manitou Springs involving dozens of cadets, including a lot of athletes. A confidential informant told Air Force OSI that at this party there were 2 bottles of alcohol, both Captain Morgan rum. The Captain Morgan with a red cap was for the boys. It was straight rum. The Captain Morgan with a blue cap, the informant said, contained Rohypnol. Rohypnol is a powerful sedative, a date rape drug, and the allegation continued that women were sexually assaulted at this party after they'd been incapacitated by this drug. That caused reaction in the Air Force immediately when they found out about this. It launched a wide investigation. 32 cadets were looked at. 19 athletes. A lot of those people got gone. Of the athletes who were examined, only 7 graduated from the academy. So they took it seriously on the cadet side. And we never said that there was cover-up in this investigation. We never alleged that the Air Force didn't take steps to look at their cadets in a painful way. But what we asked is, okay, you looked at the cadets, you looked at this party culture. within the cadets, did you look at the coaches? Did you look at your athletic director? And it doesn't look like there was a hard probe done there to determine if there were conditions within the athletic department that allowed this conduct to take place. Especially troubling is, the evidence shows that there's a core group of about a dozen football players who were involved in misconduct. I'm not talking sexual assault, but just varying degrees of misconduct. On that team. That's about 10% of a great big college football team, the largest team at the Air Force Academy. If you have a team that big with a group that size, you have a problem in your locker room.
Right.
Should the coach have known more? Should the coach have done more? And frankly, we don't have those answers yet. We're waiting for the Air Force to finish their investigation.
And every investigation any reporter does, it's almost like peeling layers away to be able to get to the truth. And sometimes you zig instead of zag and you find new things. And right now, one of the nuances that you're dealing with is, as part of this story, is reaction from politicos. And you've been getting a multitude of reaction. Tell me about that.
So far, it's been very supportive of the Academy. Senator Michael Bennett, Senator Mark Udall, Congressman Doug Lamborn here in Colorado have all said, we support the Academy's effort to investigate this. The conduct that happened is completely unacceptable. We think the Academy is the best entity to solve it. That's good news for the Academy to some degree, because it means that they won't get a congressionally mandated solution at this time. But it also means that Congress is energized enough that if they're unhappy with the answers the Academy comes up with when their investigation's over, they could well see a congressionally mandated fix.
Because ultimately, if the Academy doesn't take enough of a long, hard look at themselves and talk about what can be done to prevent this kind of activity in the future, that's when you're talking that maybe Congress says, whoa, whoa, whoa. We need another source to investigate this.
Yeah, when you see Congress reacting as they did on Monday, what you're hearing is, we're going to let you fix this, and if you don't fix it, Congress will. And Congress has broad power to subpoena people, to investigate. And if it comes to that, it would be interesting to watch, and it would be another painful chapter for the Academy. But I think right now the Academy is getting a chance to fix itself, which is great. And it sounds like the general up there is dedicated to fixing these problems and ensuring that this kind of culture never happens again on their teams.
The big question for me as a reader, reading your many stories that you've put together, and you and Joanna Bean and others have put this together, I mean, the one key element the one question comes to mind is, where do you go from here? This is a huge story. What are you working on besides what we just talked about, to watch what the Academy does, to watch what others do, but where do you go from here in the short term?
Anytime you run a story of this nature, people come out of the woodwork. Yesterday, for instance, an advocacy group from Washington, D.C. that supports military victims of sexual violence came out and said, the Air Force Academy has not been listening to our concerns. And so I think we will hear echoes of this story for some time. We will see sources coming forward with their concerns about the Academy. And we will also see people come to the Academy's defense. People are very loyal to the school for good reason.
Right.
People love that team for good reason. How can you not love the Air Force Academy football team? This is an undersized, hyper-intelligent group of young men who take the field. They never have 350-pound linemen. They never have the big defensive backs, but they win, and they fight. Even if they lose games, the heart of the Air Force Academy football team is just evident on the field. And so, yeah, people support that, and I get that, and I think that's a good thing to support. The question is, with the conduct off the field, are they matching that dedication on the field? And I think that's what fans need to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And speaking of questions, if you have questions for Tom, of course, send them right here to Gazette.com or our Facebook page on the Gazette. We'd like to hear from you, so if you have questions for him, remember, we're Between the Lines live with senior military reporter Tom Roeder. I'm Eric Singer, Gazette.com, and we're talking about this, a broken code, and we're talking about the Air Force Academy Athletics investigation. Since this story broke, since you first broke this story, you've been getting a lot of requests for interviews yourself to talk a little bit more about that. Let's explore that for a moment.
Okay, I'm a knuckle-headed city desk reporter. We are guys who don't live in the world of sports media. I've covered cops, I've covered politics, and I've covered the military in my career. And to have the Tim Brando show reach out to me, to have ESPN radio reach out to me, has been an interesting experience, because these folks call and you get me on the radio and they ask questions like, do you want the coach fired? And our culture of neutrality as city desk reporters just does not quite fit that world. That's a question that we've never considered in our reporting, because that's not what we do. We look at the facts and present facts, as opposed to jumping over, kind of jumping the shark into opinion. It's been a great experience, and I frankly, because I saw this as a military story, I never considered the wider sports audience and how important this would be to them. So I've been floored by the attention. It is good to see that people around the country are taking this seriously, and it's good to see that the sports community says, boy, we need to police ourselves. We need to, as fans, as athletes, as coaches, ensure that women are treated in a manner that is consistent with the values of the academy, consistent with the values of this country.
And earlier I talked on Between the Lines Live that you at home can be able to comment and to be able to ask questions. First, let me read this from Mark. First to you, Tom, nice work. How did this story come together? We talked about this earlier, but I think maybe Mark might have just joined us. And how long does a story like this take to report and write? Let's go back over that.
Gathering the facts that we needed to show that there was a pattern in misconduct at the academy was over the course of actually years. This was data gathered by not just me, but other reporters on this staff who covered court-martials, who covered sports at the academy, who looked at these events. Then we had the great work of reporter David Phillips, who's now at the New York Times, who uncovered the confidential informant program at the academy, had some issues with that, and in the work of that story, it uncovered athletic misconduct. And then going forward from, that happened in December, going forward from December is, okay, taking a harder look at what was going on with that athletic program. It all came together about 2 weeks ago, where we sat back and said, boy, we've got a real story here. We need to go to the academy. We went to General Michelle Johnson, and just, this is how we've operated with the academy since I've been here, which is more than a decade. We went to them and said, here's the facts that, as we found them, we want you to know them, and we would like you to respond. And the academy response was tremendous. They made every effort to be transparent. They made Brigadier General Andy Armacost, the dean, available for interview. They made athletic director Hans Mew available for interview, and as well as football coach Troy Calhoun. And in those interviews, sources like Hans Mew were very, very candid about what they've seen at the academy. Hans said, we never should have let these people in hindsight. The one theme that folks at the academy kept coming back to is, it's not like you can stick a thermometer in a recruit's mouth and determine whether or not they will have a prevalence to commit sexual assault. And I agree with that, but the question is not, is there a magical test, but are there other steps you can take in the recruiting process?
More checks and balances.
Are there more checks and balances? And did the academy go too far to take risk in bringing in recruits in order to win football games?
A lot of good questions, and let me go ahead and this is a comment from Barb for you. Tom, I've been a fan of your work for years. Well done. I agree. And this is a comment from Jim, and a good question. Have you gotten any backlash from your readers, Tom? If yes, what kind? If no, are you surprised?
There's always going to be backlash when you write almost anything. One of the great American realities is everyone has a right to hate their local newspaper on any given day, and this story was no exception. People questioned why allegations so old were coming to light now, and there's a pretty good answer for that. These court-martials just concluded in April of last year. The data that we looked at was never released in total, and there was never any evidence of a major internal review that was publicly discussed by the academy. So that's why we're looking at this now, is this hadn't happened before. So that's new, and I understand that the allegations are old, and that troubled some people. Other forms of backlash, well, you just hate the coach, you hate football. I've got called some bad words over that over the last couple of days, and that's okay. I've one of the things is, I came home from work last night. My son is proudly wearing his Air Force Academy hoodie sweatshirt.
Right.
Going to Air Force games has been a great thing for our family. I'm a huge football fan. Have been since I was a kid. Played in high school badly, but I don't think that my love of football has any bearing on this story at all. And am I a hater of the Air Force Academy? I think that could be pretty conclusively proven to be no, especially if you look at how we behaved with the Academy in this story. I made every effort to ensure that every allegation that was brought forth was brought to the Academy for answers. This was not a gotcha. This was, we didn't sneak up on them in any way because, frankly, we were concerned about this. And the way, as a newspaper, the best way to raise concerns is to make sure that the command is aware of these concerns. Because early on in this process, I don't think Michelle Johnson had any idea the level of what was going on at the Academy,
right,
or that had happened in the past. I think she's familiar with what's going on now.
Right.
But, when your commander just arrived, less than a year ago,
right,
she's not going to know what happened in 2011, and she won't have a deep dive into that culture. So I think that was a good process, and I'm proud of that. There has been a surprising amount of support from the graduate community of the Academy, because these are people who it's important to them in their lives that the Academy be known as a place that creates honorable men and women who live by the school's honor code. And that's been great. That's been refreshing. And I think the vast majority of people who attended that school say, no, this can't happen there. We won't allow it to happen there. Get it fixed.
Well, hopefully we have, now here's another question from Preston. Preston asks, any other athletes from other sports teams, or have you just targeted the football team? Good question, Preston, by the way.
Yeah, excellent question, Preston. There were athletes brought up in the story from basketball. There were athletes brought up in the story who weren't directly named, were in sports like the shooting team, and one more that I can't recall. But yes, this did look at a wider variety of sports, but the bulk of the players involved in these cases that we could find were on the football team. That just spoke, okay, if we've got a problem, the problem is likely there. Understanding that the football team is the largest team at the Academy. 10% of all intercollegiate athletes at the Academy play for that football team.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's going to be your biggest target out there,
sure,
no matter what.
Percentage-wise, of course.
If you look at the number of people who take the field for a football game, 11 at any given time on offense, 11 on defense. Basketball team, 5 guys. So,
right.
So it's going to be that way. But yes, I think overall, by talking to Hans Mew, and by the way we approached it, it was a lot more than football culture. It was about, does winning games have meaning over obeying the honor code? And so we did look at that. Another point to the football program, it is the single largest financial engine driving sports at the Academy. There is just no doubt about it. It packs fans into Falcon Stadium. It drives your merchandising. It drives your TV contracts. It drives everything like that. So an old axiom in investigative reporting is you follow the money. And we had to do that here.
And once again, if you're just joining us, this is Between the Lines Live. We're going to be wrapping up relatively soon, and we appreciate all the questions and comments from all of you who have been emailing Gazette.com or our Facebook page on Gazette. And the question is, where do we go from here as far as your reporting? What are we going to be seeing if we had a rundown? We don't want to give anyone else the specifics of your strategy, but what are we going to be seeing possibly today or tomorrow?
Probably not much. This is a time where I'm going to be gathering, the evidence that has been the fallout from this investigation. I'm going to be looking at that very hard. I'm going to be holding it to the standard of the information that went in the original story, and that takes time. There are allegations coming forward now, but those don't just get into the paper from anonymous sources. Those, conspiracy theories, those don't just wind up magically in the paper. We take a hard look at all of this, and so there will be some degree of proceeding slowly from here. But I think as the Academy completes its investigation, that's going to be a huge story to see what they've done, to see what the Pentagon's reaction to that is, to see what Congress's reaction to that might be. Big story to, as we get through the football season, to look at how is Troy Calhoun and his staff recruiting? What have they changed about their recruiting process? As we go forward, projecting out from there, Athletic Director Hans Mew is going to retire at the end of this school year. How does this affect how they look at Hans Mew's replacement? How does, what culture are they seeking in there? And so these are some of the bigger topics we're going to be looking at. Also, sexual assault in the military will continue to be a huge topic. There are continuing arguments about this before Congress. We will see this really play out in the fall season. And this is going to be a topic that involves the Air Force Academy because of this story.
And ultimately, this can be considered not just because of the Air Force Academy, but military-wide when we talk about misconduct, criminal misconduct. I mean, other institutions are probably looking within themselves as well after they read a story like this within the Air Force Academy.
Absolutely. And, we have seen similar problems at Navy, at Army, at the Coast Guard Academy, Division III school. I think that's going to go on for some time, and we'll see where it goes from there. Will we see, your great big, Pac-12 kind of colleges hold themselves to an Air Force Academy standard? Probably not.
But maybe West Point, maybe some of the other military institutions.
I mean, one of the things that drives a story like Broken Code about the Air Force Academy is because we, as a newspaper, hold them to the standards to which they hold themselves. And their standards are far higher than any other educational institution in Colorado and higher than anything you're going to find pretty much in America.
All right, and with that, we are wrapping up our Between the Lines Live. I'm Eric Singer, Gazette.com, along with senior military reporter Tom Roeder. We've been talking about A Broken Code, your exclusive Air Force Academy sports investigation, which of course we'll continue to see through, and we'll obviously see more stories as it progresses. With that, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon.